"What the hell are you doing with my kids?" Michael Anderson's shout cut through the air like a whip. He froze in the doorway of the nursery, his eyes wide in shock. The briefcase slipped from his hand and shattered against the marble floor. In front of him stood Emily Carter, the housekeeper he had hired only a week earlier. She was mopping the floor while carrying the 5-month-old twins as if they were her own. Ethan slept on her back, strapped in with a worn sling. Noah, pressed against her chest, stared at everything with bright eyes. And for the first time in 5 months, neither of them was crying. Emily slowly turned toward him, unhurried, unafraid. Her dark eyes looked at him with a calmness that completely disarmed him. "I'm not hurting them, sir," she said softly. "I'm just taking care of them." Michael opened his mouth to bark another order, but the words caught in his throat. Because while he shouted, while his voice bounced off the marble walls, the twins didn't flinch. Noah reached out a tiny hand toward his father, as if recognizing him for the first time. Ethan slowly opened his eyes without a single tear. These were the same children who had cried endlessly for 5 long months. Babies who had rejected human contact, who stiffened whenever the nannies tried to hold them, who had turned the mansion into an inferno of desperate screams. Now they seemed like 2 entirely different little beings. If this story has already touched your heart in this very first moment, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe once again in human kindness. Because what Michael was about to discover would forever change his understanding of love, loss, and the miracles that sometimes arrive disguised as the most humble person. A housekeeper who carried a secret powerful enough to heal a broken family, and a psychologist willing to do anything to destroy that inexplicable bond. After roaring that order and seeing the strange serenity in Emily's eyes, Michael froze in the nursery doorway. He didn't know if he was furious, confused, or relieved. For the first time in 5 months, his children weren't crying. 3 hours later, he was sitting in his study with an untouched glass of whiskey on his desk and 1,000 questions bombarding his mind. The photograph of Grace stared at him from its golden frame, as if judging his reaction. His wife smiled from the picture, her hands resting on the 8-month belly that had carried the twins. She had that special radiance only happy expectant mothers possess. Her green eyes sparkled with a joy Michael would never see again. Labor had begun on a rainy Tuesday in February. The twins arrived prematurely at 36 weeks, fighting for every breath inside incubators that looked like space capsules. Grace endured 12 hours of labor, smiling even as the pain overwhelmed her. "They're going to be beautiful, Michael," she had whispered, squeezing his hand with the little strength she had left. "They're going to fill your heart with love." But her heart stopped before she could meet them. Postpartum hemorrhage, unforeseen complications. Within minutes, the woman who had been his light for 8 years faded away while 2 tiny beings fought for survival in separate rooms. Michael had never wanted to be a father. Business, corporate mergers, numbers, and strategies were his natural language. Babies were unknown territory, especially babies marked by tragedy. In the early months, he hired the best nannies in the country, women with college degrees, experience in intensive care, and impeccable references. None lasted more than a month. "The children don't sleep, Mr. Anderson," each explained upon resigning. "They cry nonstop. They don't respond to stimulation. They need specialized help." Then came Dr. Victoria Miller, a child psychologist, Grace's close friend from college, a 42-year-old woman with platinum blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. She had studied at Harvard University, ran a private practice in Beverly Hills, and spoke with the authority of someone who had never doubted herself. "The babies are experiencing emotional trauma," she diagnosed during her first visit, observing the twins from a clinical distance. "Losing the maternal figure at the most vulnerable moment of their lives has created a severe pattern of separation anxiety." Her words sounded logical, scientific. Michael clung to them like a lifeline. "What do you recommend, doctor?" "Strict routine, controlled stimulation, no premature emotional bonds with temporary caregivers. The children need stability, not emotional confusion." Under her supervision, the house turned into a clinic, military-style feeding schedules, timed naps, educational toys arranged according to child development manuals. Perfect in theory. In practice, Ethan and Noah remained inconsolable little beings who cried until they lost their voices. That was when Emily Carter knocked on the service door just a week earlier, responding to the classified ad the housekeeper had posted: housekeeper wanted. Cleaning experience. References required. She had no college degree and had never worked in mansions. Her references were handwritten letters from neighborhood women vouching for her honesty and dedication. 31 years old, a single mother to a teenage daughter, she lived in a 2-bedroom apartment across town. "I don't know anything about rich babies," she had said during the interview, with that brutal honesty Michael now remembered vividly. "But I know how to clean, I know how to work hard, and I know I need this job." Michael had hired her more out of desperation than conviction. She was the 5th housekeeper in 3 months. The previous ones had all quit because of the tense atmosphere and the endless crying. During that first week, Emily had supposedly limited herself to her chores: vacuuming Persian rugs, polishing the marble hallways, cleaning windows. She worked in silence, moving through the house like an efficient shadow. But now, after what he had seen that afternoon, Michael realized he had been blind. The twins had been calmer during those past days. The crying hadn't disappeared, but it had softened. He had attributed it to Victoria's routine, to the new medication, to anything but the presence of a housekeeper who apparently had an inexplicable gift for soothing his children. How many times had Emily been near the twins without him noticing? How many times had she touched his babies while he sat through endless meetings? The image he had witnessed that afternoon replayed in his mind like a film on loop: Emily mopping with both babies strapped to her as if it were the most natural thing in the world, the absolute peace on Ethan and Noah's faces, the way they had stretched their little hands toward him without fear, without tears. That night Michael made a decision that went against all of Victoria's established protocols. He went up to the twins' room after dinner. He found Emily exactly where he expected, sitting on the floor between the 2 cribs, her legs crossed like a child's. In her arms, Ethan rested completely relaxed, while Noah played with his toes, making soft gurgling sounds of contentment. But it wasn't just that which took his breath away, it was the song. Emily was singing softly, almost whispering a melody he recognized instantly. It was the same lullaby Grace used to hum during her pregnancy, those nights when she lay on her side, stroking her swollen belly while talking to the babies. "Go to sleep, my little one, go to sleep, my son. Go to sleep, piece of my heart." The words floated in the air like pure magic. The twins weren't just not crying, they were smiling. Ethan had closed his tiny eyes, breathing with the serenity of someone who feels completely safe. Noah watched Emily's face with absolute focus, as if memorizing every feature. "Mr. Anderson," Emily's voice startled him. She had noticed his presence without even turning around, as if she had a special instinct for knowing when someone was watching her. Michael cleared his throat, feeling ridiculous for spying in his own house. "I heard silence and thought something was wrong," she finished, rising slowly so as not to disturb the babies. "It's normal. You're not used to them being quiet." There was something in her tone that wasn't reproach, but it wasn't sympathy either. It was simply observation, as if stating an obvious truth he had yet to process. "How do you do it?" Michael asked, his voice sounding more vulnerable than he intended. "The specialized nannies, the psychologists, none of them have managed." "I don't know," Emily replied with brutal honesty. "I just like being with them." She laid Ethan gently in his crib, as if he were a piece of precious crystal. The baby fussed briefly, but when she stroked his forehead with the back of her hand, he calmed instantly. "That's not an answer," Michael insisted, though without aggression. He genuinely wanted to understand. Emily turned to look at him. Her dark eyes had the same serenity he had noticed from the very first day, as if she had lived enough not to be surprised by anything anymore. "Do you talk to them?" she asked. "Talk to them? To your children? Tell them things? Tell them you love them?" The question hit him like a punch to the stomach. Michael realized that he hadn't. He had never really spoken to them. He saw them as responsibilities, problems to solve, fragile little beings who depended on him but with whom he didn't know how to connect. "It's just that," he began, but the words stuck. "They know," Emily said simply. "Babies always know when someone truly loves them or when someone is just fulfilling an obligation." It was such a raw truth that it hurt. Michael felt as though a blindfold had been ripped from his eyes. The following days turned into a strange dance of mutual observation. Michael began staying home longer, inventing excuses to pass by the twins' room whenever Emily was there. Officially, she was still only the housekeeper. In practice, she had become the only person capable of bringing peace to that house. The routine established itself naturally. Emily arrived at 8 in the morning and began her cleaning tasks, but the twins seemed to have an internal clock that sensed her presence. When she went upstairs, they stopped crying. When she worked near their room, they stayed awake and alert, following the sound of her footsteps. At lunchtime, while the hired nannies took a break, Emily stayed with the children, not because anyone asked her to, but because they needed her, and she needed them. Michael caught her whispering stories to them about her own daughter, describing the world they would one day discover. She spoke of birds and flowers, of music and colors, of simple and beautiful things that existed beyond the marble walls of the mansion. "When you're older," she would say as she changed their diapers with a skill that even the professional nannies envied, "you'll discover the world is full of wonderful things. You'll see yellow butterflies. You'll hear the sound of the rain. You'll taste strawberry ice cream." The twins listened to her as if they understood every word. One afternoon, while Michael pretended to read emails on his laptop, he overheard a conversation that chilled him. "I don't understand what she sees in those kids," one of the nannies said to another as they prepared bottles in the kitchen. "They're strange, too sensitive, too demanding. And that cleaning woman doesn't help either," the second nanny replied. "She's spoiling them. What she's doing isn't professional. We should talk to Mr. Anderson. This isn't right." That night, after dinner, Michael went up to the twins' room. Emily had already left, and the night nannies had taken over. He found Ethan and Noah crying with the same desperation he knew so well, their tiny arms stretched toward the door as if waiting for someone to come and rescue them. He walked slowly to the cribs. For the first time in 5 months, he really looked at them, not as problems to solve or responsibilities to shoulder, but as his children. They were beautiful. They had Grace's green, jade-like eyes and her small, upturned nose, but their mouths, their chins, the shape of their ears, those were his. "Hi," he whispered, feeling ridiculous but determined to try. I'm Daddy." Ethan stopped crying for a moment, as if he recognized something familiar in the voice he had heard roar, but never speak with tenderness. "I know I haven't been," Michael had to clear his throat to continue. "I haven't been what you needed. But I'm here. I love you." It was the first time he had spoken those words out loud. Noah reached out a tiny hand toward him, and after a moment's hesitation, Michael extended his index finger. The little fingers curled around it with surprising strength. In that moment, something changed forever in Michael Anderson's heart. The next day, when Emily arrived, he was waiting for her in the kitchen. "I need to talk to you," he said. And for the first time since he had met her, his voice didn't sound authoritative, it sounded human. She poured herself a cup of coffee and waited with the infinite patience that seemed to define her. "The children," Michael began, searching for the right words. "You're not a nanny, you're not a psychologist, you don't have degrees or professional experience, but they already chose me, sir," Emily interrupted gently. "And I already chose them." "That's exactly what worries me," Michael admitted. "I don't understand what's happening here. I don't understand how someone who arrived a week ago can do what specialists with years of experience couldn't." Emily looked him straight in the eyes, and for a moment Michael felt as though she could see right through him, down to the most broken and fearful parts of his soul. "Do you want me to leave?" The question hung in the air between them like a bomb about to explode. Michael realized he didn't. He definitely didn't want her to leave, but he also didn't know exactly what he wanted. "I want to understand," he finally said. "I want to understand what you have that I don't." "Nothing you can't learn," she replied with a smile full of pure kindness. "It just takes time and the willingness to love without fear." Dr. Victoria Miller arrived at the Anderson mansion on a Tuesday afternoon with her Italian leather briefcase and that cold smile she wore like professional armor. Her heels clicked against the marble of the foyer as she made her way to Michael's study, where she had requested an urgent meeting. "We have a serious problem, Michael," she announced bluntly, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "The staff has informed me of irregular situations with the twins." Michael looked up from the contracts he had been reviewing. For the past week, he had been working more from home, using the East Wing renovations as an excuse. In reality, he just wanted to be nearby when the children were calm. "What kind of irregularities?" Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out a notebook. Her movements were precise, calculated, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. The housekeeper, she consulted her notes. Emily Carter is exhibiting behaviors that directly interfere with the care protocol we established for the children. Unauthorized physical contact, disruption of feeding schedules, inappropriate sensory stimulation, Victoria listed in a clinical tone. And most concerning of all, she is creating an emotional dependency bond that could be extremely harmful to Ethan and Noah's psychological development. Michael set his pen down on the desk. In recent days, he had seen his children happier than ever, and now that was being labeled a problem. Doctor, with all due respect, the children are better than ever. They sleep, they smile, they barely cry. Exactly, Victoria interrupted, leaning forward with urgency. That artificial calm is not healthy. Babies need to express their emotions, including frustration and crying. What that woman is doing is emotionally sedating them. Her words sounded logical, backed by years of study and professional experience, but something inside Michael's chest rebelled against them. Are you suggesting it's wrong for my children to be calm? I'm saying their calm has to come from the right place, Victoria explained with exaggerated patience. From a secure bond with qualified authority figures, not from emotional dependence on an untrained housekeeper. Victoria stood and walked to the window overlooking the backyard, where Emily was hanging laundry on the service patio. There was something in the way she watched her that made Michael uneasy. Look, Michael, Victoria continued without taking her eyes off the woman, I know you and Grace wanted the best for these children. Grace confided everything to me during her pregnancy, her fears, her hopes, even her worries about your ability to connect emotionally with the babies. The blow was sharp and deliberate. Michael felt as if a knife had been driven straight into his chest. Grace never said. Grace loved me like a sister. Victoria turned, her eyes glinting with something strange. She told me everything, and she was worried, Michael. She knew business had always been your priority, that you had never shown real interest in building a family. Michael shot to his feet, blood pounding in his temples. That doesn't give you the right to. It gives me the right to protect those children, Victoria cut him off firmly. Grace asked me to take care of them if anything happened to her. They are in my professional hands, and I will not allow an untrained housekeeper to ruin all the work we've done. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken threats. Victoria returned to her seat and pulled several documents from her briefcase. I have the official recommendations here, she said, sliding the papers across the desk. Immediate removal of the disruptive element, implementation of strict routines under professional supervision, and, she paused dramatically, a full psychological evaluation of your parental fitness. The words dropped like stones into still water. Michael read them twice before fully grasping what he was seeing. Are you threatening to take my children away from me? I'm offering professional help, Victoria corrected in a gentle tone. But if you insist on letting this situation continue, I'll have to consider other legal options. Michael looked at the documents. Everything appeared official, backed by medical terminology and institutional seals. He felt as though he were navigating uncharted waters, without a compass or a map. That afternoon, after Victoria left, Michael went up to the twins' room with a knot in his stomach. He found Emily singing to them while folding clean laundry. The children were awake and alert, following her every move with that concentrated attention that had already become familiar. Emily, he said from the doorway, his voice sounding more formal than it had in recent days. She turned, and something in Michael's expression told her immediately that something had changed. Ma'am, I need you to keep your distance from the children. The words came out like broken glass. Emily blinked slowly, as if she hadn't heard correctly. Distance? The psychologist says you're creating dependency, that it's not healthy, that they need to learn to. He stopped, because the words sounded empty even to him. Just stay away from them, please. Emily didn't answer right away. She looked at the twins, who had started to fidget at the tense tone of the conversation. Then she looked at Michael, and in her eyes was a deep sadness, but also understanding. Is that what you want? She asked softly. Or is it what you were told you should want? The question disarmed him completely. Michael realized he didn't know the difference. It's what has to be, he murmured, hating himself for every word. Emily nodded slowly, stepped to the cribs one last time, gently stroked Ethan and Noah's foreheads, and left the room without another word. The twins began crying before she even reached the stairs. The next 3 days were hell. The professional nannies returned to their strict routine, feeding every 3 hours, timed naps, controlled stimulation according to child development manuals. Perfect on paper. In reality, Ethan and Noah reverted to the constant desperation that had marked their first months of life. They cried until they had no voice left. They refused their bottles. They stiffened whenever anyone tried to hold them. And Emily worked in silence, cleaning floors that were already spotless, avoiding the second floor as much as possible. Michael tried to convince himself it was temporary, that the children would adjust, but the sleepless nights, the constant crying, and the tension seeping back into every corner of the house told him he had made a terrible mistake. On Friday morning, while getting ready for the office, he overheard the nannies talking in the kitchen. "It's impossible to work like this," one said. "These kids are completely out of control, and that woman is still here as a constant reminder," the other added. "The children look for her with their eyes when they cry. It's like they miss her. We should talk to the doctor. This isn't working." Michael froze in the hallway, processing what he had just heard. His children missed Emily. They searched for her, suffered because of her absence. That afternoon, for the first time in years, he canceled all his meetings and stayed home. He went up to the twins' room and found a scene that broke his heart. Ethan and Noah lay in their cribs, exhausted from crying. Their little eyes were swollen, their tiny fists clenched in frustration. One of the nannies tried to feed them with a bottle, but they turned their heads away, rejecting all comfort. "Leave me alone with them," Michael said. The nanny stepped out, visibly relieved to take a break. Michael slowly approached the cribs. The twins looked at him with those green eyes identical to Grace's, but there was something else in them now, a sadness that should not exist in such small beings. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." He sat on the floor between the two cribs, imitating the position he had seen Emily take so many times. He began talking to them, telling them about his day, about the weather, about anything that came to mind. But it wasn't enough. He wasn't Emily. He didn't have that inexplicable magic that turned tears into smiles. That night Michael made a decision that would change everything. The next day he asked Emily to stay after her shift. "I made a mistake," he told her, the hardest words he had ever spoken in his life. "The children need you, and I do too." Emily looked at him with those serene eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. "And the doctor doesn't live in this house," Michael added with a firmness he hadn't felt in days. "She doesn't know my children the way you do, and she's not going to decide who can love them and who can't." 2 weeks after defying Dr. Victoria Miller's orders, Michael had regained something he thought he had lost forever: peace in his own home. Peace had returned to his house. The twins were smiling again. Emily had resumed her natural routine with them, and for the first time since Grace's death, the mansion felt like a real home. But that tranquility was deceptive. Victoria had abruptly stopped visiting, claiming scheduling conflicts whenever Michael tried to reach her. The professional nannies resigned all at once, citing irreconcilable methodological differences. And though nothing had officially changed, Michael felt a growing tension, as if he were living in the eye of a hurricane that had yet to arrive. It was during one of those seemingly calm afternoons, while sorting through Grace's papers he had been postponing since her death, that fate decided to reveal its hand. Michael was in the master bedroom, finally emptying the last drawer of his wife's vanity. Jewelry she would never wear again, perfumes that still held her scent, photographs from trips they had taken together. Each object was a stab of nostalgia. At the bottom of the drawer, wrapped in a blue silk scarf, he found something unexpected: a small brown leather diary and several sealed envelopes. The diary had Grace's name engraved in gold letters, and the envelopes were addressed to different people. One of them left him frozen: "For Michael, only open if something happens to me during childbirth." With trembling hands he broke the seal and pulled out several sheets written in Grace's elegant handwriting. The date at the top hit him like a fist: 2 days before the twins were born. "My love, if you are reading this, it means something went wrong and I couldn't be there to raise our babies with you. I know you're afraid. You've always been afraid of love, of vulnerability, of opening your heart completely. But these children will need your whole soul, not just your protection. There are things I never told you because I didn't want to worry you, but now it's important that you know the truth. During the first months of pregnancy, I had complications, bleeding, threats of miscarriage, entire nights in the hospital believing I was going to lose the babies. I was terrified, alone, not knowing who to turn to. You worked so much, so focused on preparing our financial future, that I didn't want to add my fears to your burden. That's when I met Emily. She worked the night cleaning shift at the hospital, but she wasn't just any employee. She had a gift, Michael, an inexplicable ability to soothe people who were suffering. I ran into her crying in the hospital bathroom after a false alarm, and she simply sat with me. She didn't judge me, didn't give me medical advice I'd already heard 1,000 times. She just kept me company. Over the following months, we became friends. She came to visit me on the hard days. She brought me herbal tea she prepared herself. She told me stories about her own daughter to distract me from the fear. And when the babies started moving, Emily would place her hands on my belly, and it was as if they recognized her. They calmed immediately. She told me something I'll never forget: these children are going to need a lot of love, Mrs. Grace, the kind of love you don't learn from books. And she was right. I knew deep in my heart that there was something special in the connection between Emily and my babies. That's why, Michael, if anything happens to me, find Emily Carter. Not as an employee, not as a temporary caregiver, but as the second mother these children will need. She has something that neither your money nor the best specialists in the world can buy: the ability to love unconditionally, to see the soul of people beyond their circumstances. I know this will sound strange to you, almost mystical. I know your rational mind will resist, but trust me one last time. Trust what your heart tells you when you see her with our children. And, Michael, be careful with Victoria. I know she's my friend, I know she will offer you help, but something about her worries me. During the pregnancy she started acting strangely. She made comments about how hard it would be for you to raise the children alone, about how she could take over if something happened to me. At first, I thought it was genuine concern, but then I began to notice how she looked at my belly, how she spoke of our babies instead of your babies. I'm not sure what she's plotting, but I sense her intentions are not as pure as they seem. Please don't hand over our children without being completely sure it's the right thing to do. I love you, Michael. Love our babies for me. And remember, sometimes angels arrive disguised as ordinary people. Forever yours, Grace. P.S. The other envelope contains all of Emily's information, her address, her phone number, everything you'll need to find her. It's no coincidence she appeared in your life exactly when the children needed her most. Michael read the letter 3 times before his mind could fully process it. His hands trembled as he opened the second envelope and indeed found all of Emily's personal information, including photographs of her with Grace at the hospital. In one photo, Grace was in a hospital bed, pale but smiling, while Emily held her hand. In another, Emily had her palms pressed against Grace's swollen belly, and both women seemed focused on something deep and invisible. At the bottom of the envelope was one last note, written in urgent handwriting: if Victoria tries to separate Emily from the children, fight for her. The babies already chose her before they were born. Trust that connection. Michael collapsed onto the bed, the letter still in his hands, as the fragments of the past few months began to make sense. Emily's sudden appearance in his life, the inexplicable connection between her and the twins, the lullaby she knew without anyone ever teaching her. It had all been destined. And Victoria, her insistence on separating Emily from the children, her veiled threats, her possessive tone when she spoke of the twins. Grace asked me to take care of them, she had said. But Grace had asked for the exact opposite. The sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled him from his thoughts. It was Emily climbing the stairs after finishing her chores for the day. Michael jumped up quickly and stepped into the hall. "Emily, wait!" he called out, the letter still in his hand. She stopped, turning toward him with that serene expression that had already become familiar. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Emily nodded, waiting. "Did you know my wife?" Emily's face changed. The serenity gave way to a deep expression of pain mixed with something that looked like relief. "Yes," she answered simply. "I knew her. Why didn't you tell me?" Emily glanced at the letter in Michael's hand, and a sad smile crossed her face. "Because you weren't ready to hear it, and because I wasn't sure if she would have wanted you to know." "Tell me," Michael pleaded, his voice desperate. "Tell me everything." Emily sat down on the top step, as if preparing for a long conversation. Michael sat across from her, and for the first time since they had met, there was no hierarchy between them, just two people who had loved the same extraordinary woman. "I met Mrs. Grace when she was very scared," Emily began softly. "The doctors had told her she might lose the babies, and she felt very alone. I worked the night shift at the hospital, and sometimes people need more than medicine, they need someone to listen. Why didn't she tell me she was afraid?" "Because you were afraid too, sir." She knew it. "You worked so much because that was your way of showing love, making sure she and the babies had everything they needed. But what she needed was company." Michael felt a stab of guilt so sharp it nearly stole his breath. "During the months I spent with her," Emily continued, "she spoke to me often about you, about how good you were, how much she loved you, but also about her fears. She was afraid you wouldn't know how to connect with the babies, that work would pull you away from them, just like it had during the pregnancy." "She was right," Michael admitted hoarsely. "But she also told me something else." Emily leaned forward. "She told me you had a huge heart, but that you had learned to protect it so much that sometimes you forgot to use it. And that these babies were going to teach you how to love again." The tears Michael had been holding back for months finally rolled down his cheeks. "When I learned she had died and that you needed a housekeeper," Emily paused, choosing her words carefully. "It wasn't by chance that I applied for the job. It was a promise I made." "What kind of promise?" "That I would care for your babies until you learned to be the father they needed, and that I wouldn't leave until I was sure you would all be okay." Michael looked at this extraordinary woman who had come into his life disguised as a housekeeper, when in truth she was a final gift from the wife he had lost, a guardian angel sent from beyond to heal a broken family. "Victoria," he said suddenly, remembering Grace's warnings. "She knew about you. She knew Grace wanted you to care for the children." Emily's expression darkened. "Dr. Miller always wanted what Mrs. Grace had. During the pregnancy she came to the hospital, and the way she looked at your wife, the way she spoke of the babies as if they were hers, it gave me chills." "Do you think she'll try something?" "I think she already is, sir. And I think she won't stop until she gets what she wants." That night Michael couldn't sleep. Grace's letter had revealed not only the truth about Emily but also a threat that had been growing in the shadows since the twins' birth. The next day he decided to dig deeper into Victoria's background. What he discovered filled him with horror and made him realize that the battle for his children was only just beginning. The private investigator Michael had hired handed him the report on a Friday morning, 25 pages of meticulous investigation that revealed a truth darker than he had ever imagined. Victoria Miller wasn't just the manipulative friend Grace had sensed. She was a woman with a history of dangerous obsessions, 3 divorces, 2 lawsuits for professional harassment, a failed adoption attempt that ended in scandal when it was discovered she had falsified psychological documents to disqualify biological parents, and, most chilling of all, a pattern of rescuing children from families she deemed dysfunctional, backed by her professional authority and a network of contacts within Child Protective Services who saw her as a savior of at-risk minors. Michael finished reading the report with trembling hands. Grace had been right. Victoria hadn't come to help, she had come to hunt. That very afternoon, while Emily was singing to the twins upstairs, the mansion's doorbell rang. Michael opened the door and found Victoria there, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood 2 Child Protective Services officers and a man in a suit who introduced himself as a state legal representative. "Michael," Victoria said with a smile that never reached her eyes, "I hope you're prepared to do the right thing for those children." "What are you talking about?" The legal representative stepped forward, extending an official folder. "Mr. Anderson, we've received a report of child neglect and exposure to unqualified caregivers. We have a court order to evaluate the living conditions of the minors, Ethan and Noah Anderson." Michael felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. He opened the folder with shaking hands and read accusations that left him breathless: emotionally absent father, exposure to household staff without background checks, negligence in following established medical protocols. All signed by Dr. Victoria Miller as a professional witness. "This is ridiculous," he managed to say. "Your children are being cared for by a housekeeper with no credentials," Victoria interrupted. "Michael, I know this is difficult, but you need to think about what's best for Ethan and Noah, not what's most convenient for you. The CPS officers had already entered the house and were heading for the stairs. Michael followed them, panic rising in his chest like a poisonous tide. They found Emily in the twins' room, reading them a story while they played peacefully in their cribs. The scene was one of absolute peace, of pure and unconditional love. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, "we need you to step aside while we evaluate the children." Emily looked at Michael with eyes full of understanding. She knew this moment would come. She had been waiting for it. "All right," she murmured, caressing Ethan and Noah's cheeks one last time. "Everything will be fine." But as she stepped away from the cribs, the twins began to cry. It wasn't the usual fussiness of upset babies, it was raw anguish, as if they knew something terrible was happening. The officers tried to calm them, but the crying only intensified. Victoria stepped forward with a professional smile. "It's normal," she explained. "The children are confused by the dysfunctional bond that has been created. With time and proper care, they'll learn to form healthy attachments." But the twins wouldn't calm down. Their screams filled the mansion, bouncing off the marble walls like a symphony of pain. Michael couldn't take it anymore. "Enough," he roared, his voice silencing everyone in the room. "Get out of my house, all of you." The legal representative straightened. "Mr. Anderson, if you refuse to cooperate with this evaluation, we'll have to consider the temporary removal of the minors until—" "You're not taking my children anywhere." Michael planted himself between the officers and the cribs, arms spread wide like a human wall. In that moment, something shifted inside him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't calculating risks or analyzing consequences. He was simply protecting his babies with the primal ferocity of a father. "Michael," Victoria said in a condescending tone, "you're reacting emotionally. This isn't what Grace would have wanted. Don't you dare mention my wife." Michael pulled Grace's letter from his pocket and waved it in front of Victoria's face. "I know the truth. I know she warned me about you, and I know exactly what you're trying to do." The color drained from Victoria's face. For the first time since she had arrived, her mask of professional concern cracked. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Grace knew you wanted to steal my children," Michael shouted. "And I have the letter to prove it." He began to read aloud, his voice shaking with fury and pain. "Be careful with Victoria. She started acting strangely. She made comments about how hard it would be for you to raise the children alone, about how she could take over if something happened to me." The CPS officers glanced at each other, visibly uncomfortable. The legal representative frowned. "Dr. Miller, do you have any comment on these accusations?" Victoria tried to regain her composure, but something fierce had flared in her eyes. "That letter?" Grace was on heavy medication during the pregnancy. She wasn't in her right mind. "I only wanted to protect these children from a father who clearly isn't prepared to." "Liar." The voice that cut through the air wasn't Michael's. It was Emily's, who had appeared in the doorway, her face transformed by a righteous fury no one had ever seen before. "You harassed Mrs. Grace for months," Emily declared, stepping toward Victoria with firm strides. "You called her at all hours. You showed up at the hospital without warning. You told her Mr. Anderson was going to abandon her. I was there. I saw it all. A housekeeper may not be considered a credible witness, but this is." Emily pulled a small digital recorder from her pocket. "Mrs. Grace was so worried about your behavior that she asked me to record our conversations, especially the times you showed up and said strange things." She pressed the play button, and Grace's voice filled the room, clear and strong from beyond the grave. "Emily, I'm worried about Victoria. She came to the hospital again today without being called, and when I told her Michael and I had chosen the babies' names, she got very upset. She said we should pick names with more meaning. We. Since when is she part of the decisions about my children?" The recording continued, revealing conversation after conversation in which Grace expressed her growing discomfort with Victoria's obsessive behavior. The silence that followed was absolute. The twins had stopped crying, as if their mother's voice had brought peace even from death. The legal representative snapped his folder shut. "Dr. Miller, I'm afraid we're going to need to investigate the circumstances of this report further before proceeding. This is ridiculous." Victoria exploded, all pretense of professionalism gone. "Those children belong to me. Grace was my best friend. I knew her better than anyone. I should be the one raising them." The words came out like pure venom, finally exposing the truth she had hidden behind her professional mask. "Ma'am," one of the officers said firmly, "you're going to need to come with us to answer some questions." But Victoria had already lost complete control. "You can't do this. I have rights. Grace promised me." "Grace promised you nothing," Michael interrupted, his voice cold as steel. "And now I understand why." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. When it was answered, he simply said, "Detective James Walker, you can proceed with the charges for harassment, falsification of official documents, and conspiracy to separate children from their rightful parents." Victoria's face completely fell apart. "No, you can't prove anything." "I have the full report on your history," Michael replied. 3 previous families, the same pattern, always using your professional authority to separate children from parents you deemed unfit." The officers escorted Victoria out as she screamed threats and incoherent accusations. Her last words, before the door closed behind her, were, "Those children will suffer without me. You don't know what you're doing." When everyone was finally gone, the mansion returned to silence. Michael, Emily, and the twins were left alone in the room that had been a battlefield. Ethan and Noah looked at Emily with their wide green eyes, as if they knew she had saved them. Michael slowly approached the cribs, picked up his children for the first time without fear, and held them against his chest. "Thank you," he whispered to Emily, and those 2 words carried the entire universe of gratitude he felt. "Don't thank me," she answered with a smile. "Thank your wife. She's the one who planned all of this from the beginning." That night, while the twins slept peacefully after the storm, Michael realized he had gained more than just a legal battle. He had gained a family. 3 years later, the Anderson mansion's garden looked completely different. Where once there had been only empty, perfect designs, now colorful swings stood, a half-built treehouse, and small toys scattered across the lawn as evidence of real life. Michael sat on the porch steps, watching a scene that 3 years earlier would have seemed impossible. In the yard, 2 little boys with brown hair and green eyes chased soap bubbles that Emily blew from a small pink wand. Ethan, now 3.5, had inherited his father's thoughtful nature but carried Grace's sweetness. Noah, just 2 minutes younger than his twin, was pure energy, laughing non-stop as he tried to catch the bubbles floating toward the sky. "Look, Daddy!" Ethan shouted, pointing at a particularly big bubble. "It's huge like a ball. I'm gonna catch it!" Noah exclaimed, leaping with his tiny arms stretched toward the sky. Michael smiled, the kind of smile he had learned to use without restraint during those years of healing. He rose and walked toward his family, because that was exactly what they were now, a family. Emily wore a yellow cotton dress that fluttered in the evening breeze. On her ring finger gleamed a simple gold band that Michael had given her exactly 1 year earlier during an intimate ceremony in the very garden where the children now played. It hadn't been a traditional romantic proposal, it had been something much deeper, the acknowledgement of a truth that had already existed for a long time. "The kids already see you as their mother," he had told her that afternoon while the twins napped. "I already see you as my wife. All that's left is to make it official." Emily had cried, but not from sadness. She had cried because, at last, all the broken pieces of their lives had found a way to fit perfectly together. Now, as he watched this extraordinary woman playing with his children, Michael remembered the words Grace had written in her letter, "Sometimes angels arrive disguised as ordinary people." Grace had been right about everything. The investigation into Victoria had revealed a pattern of behavior spanning more than a decade. 5 previous families had been victims of her manipulations, and in 3 of those cases she had managed to gain temporary custody of children by abusing her professional authority. The children had eventually been returned to their families, but not without suffering traumas that would take years to heal. Victoria was now serving an 8-year sentence for conspiracy, falsification of official documents, and abuse of authority. Her professional license had been permanently revoked. But Michael no longer thought about her. Victoria belonged to the past, to that dark time when he hadn't known how to be a father or how to open his heart without fear. "Daddy, come on!" Noah shouted, running toward him with his little arms stretched out. Michael crouched and lifted his younger son, spinning him in the air until his laughter filled the entire garden. Ethan quickly joined in, clinging to his father's leg and demanding his turn. All right, Michael laughed. "One at a time, or you'll knock me over." Emily walked over with that serene smile he had come to love more than any work of art or business achievement. In her arms she carried little Clara, only 8 months old, the daughter they had conceived together, the ultimate symbol that their love was real and lasting. The baby had Emily's dark eyes but the golden hair of her biological mother and a smile that seemed to light up everything around her. The twins adored her with that pure intensity only children can have, and they had already taken on the role of protective older brothers. "It's time for dinner," Emily announced, adjusting the baby on her hip. "And afterward, bath time for everyone." "No," the twins protested in unison, but it was only pretend. They knew that after bath time came story time, and that was their favorite part of the day. As they walked back toward the house, Michael took Emily's free hand and squeezed it gently. She looked at him with those eyes that held the secrets of unconditional love, and he leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you," he whispered, as he did every night. "For what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "For teaching me to be a father, for teaching me to love without fear, for bringing light into this house." "You already knew how to do all of that," Emily replied tenderly. "You just needed someone to tell you it was okay to feel it." That night, after dinner at a table now alive with conversation and laughter, after baths filled with splashes and games, after stories Emily told with different voices for each character, Michael found himself once again in the study where he had spent so many lonely nights, but now he wasn't alone. On the desk, beside Grace's photograph that still held its place of honor, were new pictures, the twins taking their first steps, Emily radiant during her pregnancy, little Clara asleep between her older brothers. Moments of a life he had come to treasure more than any professional accomplishment. He sat down in his chair and opened the bottom drawer of the desk, where he kept something very special. It was a letter he had begun writing months earlier to Grace, a letter he would never send but that he needed to write. In the garden, under the moonlight, the flowers Emily had planted the previous year bloomed in full splendor. Among them, a small white rosebush that had sprouted on its own, without anyone planting it, grew strong and beautiful, as if Grace had sent one final sign of approval from somewhere love never dies. Not all angels have wings. Some arrive with a mop in hand and a heart ready to love what no one else sees. And sometimes the greatest love we can receive is the one that teaches us that we deserve to be loved just as we are. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments which part moved you the most. Have you ever met someone like Emily, someone who came into your life just when you needed them the most? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that restore faith in human kindness. Give this video a like if you believe love always finds a way to triumph, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles exist. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll keep exploring the invisible connections that bring together people destined to meet.